For the past 17 months, Israel's been fighting a war on 7 fronts. But behind every battlefield, every attack, and every threat, there has been one orchestrator pulling the strings: the Islamic Republic of Iran. Then this past Saturday, Israel got an unprecedented look inside the republic's carefully guarded capital, Tehran. A secretly recorded video captured at immense personal risk revealed what the regime would like to keep hidden. The footage was filmed by Ali, a 44-year-old unemployed electronics expert who risked everything to pull back the curtain on Iran's ruling elite. As Ali walks through Tehran, he shows us 2 worlds, one of excess and one of struggle. He starts in the north. There we can see luxury malls filled with items, the cheapest of which is $300, high-end boutiques, and great mansions. Only the families of senior IRGC members stop here, buying foreign brands without a second thought. Ali films young women, daughters of regime officials, strolling freely without hijabs, stepping into Lamborghinis and Porsches. These are the same families who chant "Death to America" and "Death to England," while holding passports from those very same countries in their pockets. Then Ali takes us to the other side of Iran, where ordinary people live. Here, power outages stretch for hours. A carousel in an amusement park sits frozen in midair because the electricity has been cut. Water pumps stop working daily. Parents count every bill just to afford a bag of rice. The state spends billions funding Hamas, Hezbollah militias in Iraq and Afghanistan. Yet Ali asks, why are the people left to struggle? Ali tells us about his own life, about how, like so many others, he remains unmarried and childless, not by choice, but because he simply can't afford to start a family. He is part of a lost generation, sacrificed for the regime's obsession with exporting terror. And then, of all places, Ali's footage is sent to Israel's Channel 12 network. Someone inside Iran wanted Israelis to see this. But why? What message is being sent, and why now? To break it all down, I'm joined by one of the world's foremost experts on Iran, Dr. Harold Rhode. Dr. Rhode spent 28 years in the service of the United States as an advisor in the Pentagon, providing unique behind-the-scenes insights into Iran, Iraq, and Turkey. Having lived in Iran and studied there, Harold is considered one of the foremost experts with his finger on the pulse of what is really happening inside the regime. Welcome, Dr. Harold Rhode, to the True East Podcast.
Nice to be here, Doron. It's wonderful being here.
Thank you, my friend. So, Harold, I want to start with the video. Why would a group of Iranians risk their lives to take this video secretly and send it to Channel 12 News in Israel?
Their lives are so terrible. That's how they see it. Everything is falling apart. They lack electricity. They lack water. When I say lack, electricity could be 1 hour a day in certain parts of Tehran. The water is turned off. Iran, when I lived there, which is 1978, that time frame it was just beautiful. Everything is falling apart. There's only one group of people who have everything they want, and that is a place in North Tehran, which is where the families of the regime live, and they don't wear hijabs, the women. They are not covered. They do all sorts of things that anywhere else in the country, they would be arrested. And the average person in Iran today, in that video that you're talking about, there was a guy, I think he had an MA, he's an engineering student. 90% of the engineers who study in Iran left the country. We're talking about maybe 6 months ago. It has to be higher. They have no future. The schools are known throughout the world. They are first class. Any Iranian with an education like the man in the video, no problem getting a job in the United States or Europe, whatever. They're wanted. In Iran, they have no future. And they leave. What is worse is they're not having children. It's a general phenomenon throughout the Muslim world. But if you have, children are a vote for the future. Here in this country, in Israel, here you have the war. The birth rate has gone up among the Jews. That's a vote for the future. They in Iran know they have no future. They're basically celibate, or if they're not celibate, they are just having a good time because they have there's no future for them.
But why let me ask you, they could have sent this to the news in the United States, the news in England. Why would Iranians risk their lives to send this to Israel? Why are they sending a message to Israel, of all places?
Well, there are two views. From an Iranian point of view, and this goes back even to the time that I was studying in Iran. I went to university at one point in Iran. Is that America is the most powerful country in the world. And what people control America and control the world? A tiny little people, the largest group of which live in the country where we are right now, which is Israel.
So they think that Jews control America.
No, they don't think. They know. From their point of view, know in quotes, and how we who grew up in the United States would think of it. They know it. I could tell you stories that you simply wouldn't believe. Here's one, and this is going to sound really nuts. When the country was beginning to fall apart, I was in Iran in the early and mid stages of the revolution in 78. And then we fled to Afghanistan.
Just for background, this is when the Shah was in power and he was being overthrown by the Islamic Republic.
We didn't know it was the Islamic Republic at the time. But all these students, they had a marvelous feel for who was running the country and who had power. And public opinion means I'm afraid of who is running things, and I will bow down to it. And tomorrow, if they're weak, all of a sudden, I will do awful things to the people I said I was for yesterday because I don't want to get in trouble. The secret police would come and get me. And now I'm trying to bow down to the new people who are in power. And from my experience and things that I had, and here again how it works. So even to try to figure out what public opinion is, the real question is who has power and who do the people believe have power. America is the most powerful country in the world. It's the 800-pound gorilla. If America is not prepared to fight the regime there, and this is again throughout the Muslim world, then there's, as the Minister Ron Dermer, who used to be the ambassador in the United States, would say, then the 250-pound gorilla is just fine. Israel runs America, which runs the world. Now, that's why the people got their video in Iran to Channel 12, because if they can convince the Jews, I'm just talking the way they think about it. What I think is, of course, and I'm sure you, Doron, is completely different. But that's how they think. And if you want to deal with another culture, as my mentor always used to say, was probably the greatest professor of Middle East things, Bernard Lewis, used to say, you must understand other cultures in terms of how they see the world. And that's how you determine how you make policy. You use their culture to get what you want done.
So Iran sees Israel as the 250-pound gorilla.
Yes.
Why did they send this message now? And are they expecting Israel to do something? The message arrived. Why now? And what are they expecting us to do?
Okay. We now have President Trump in the United States, if I may say, thank God. The reason is the world takes America seriously again. And in this part of the world, we hear it throughout in the Middle East, we're in basically the heart of the Muslim world. They look at Trump's serious. The fact that you say that Hamas, if they don't release all the hostages, and you don't, and all of a sudden, if Hamas is not doing this, It shows American weakness. I hope the Trump administration people realize this, which means they have to move fast. In the Middle East, if you speak, it's a sign that maybe you're not going to do. You do things. And then people say, you're powerful. I bow down to you. Israel is the strongest power in the Middle East. It is part of America from a Muslim point of view. All non-Muslims are one people. That's from their point of view. So it is natural that America is supposed to support its non-Muslim ally. It's because America is the center of the non-Muslim world. Little Israel, in the space that is the size of New Jersey, little Israel, if America supports it, that's logical to them. Even secular Muslims who grew up in a Muslim culture know that there are two peoples in this world, the Muslims and the non-Muslims. And when, during the previous American administration, that is the Biden administration and Obama, I'm pronouncing that in a Persian way for a reason, maybe we'll get back to that, when they basically did everything they could to put daylight between Israel and America, the reaction throughout the Muslim world, and I mean throughout the Muslim world, if America is not going to support its fellow non-Muslims, because we're all one group, then we know that it won't, like the Saudis or the Gulfies and all the other people, their answer is, well, they're clearly not going to support us because they're Muslims, and they look at Israel and they say, well, Israel's non-Muslim, so you can't trust the Americans. If they won't support themselves, they'll never support us.
So they felt that under Biden and under the Obama administration, that the lack of support for Israel, the perceived lack of support for Israel, told them that if America's not supporting Israel, who's America's natural ally, we're talking about the average Iranian person, by the way.
Yes.
They're thinking America won't come to their defense. Ever. And now they see Trump, who is speaking strong and acting strong in Israel, and they see an opportunity then that Trump is going to do what for them? What are they hoping is going to take place here?
Put it this way. When you have poor people, I'm going to talk about a Turkish demonstration I was in years ago, but it applies to Iran as well. But the analogy popped into my mind. They're listening, this is some years ago, to a political figure. This is before the present leader. That's not a polite term in Turkish. Erdogan. And they're all yelling in Turkish, Baba, Baba, which is daddy, daddy. Bizi kurta, save us, save us. That's the job of the leader. Now applying this to Iran. The government can't supply the basic needs of the Iranian people. There's no alternative. And if Israel and America decide to, shall we say, end the regime, then it's like, oh my God, of course we're pro-American and pro-Israeli. And in that video that you mentioned, there was a woman who was talking about how much they admire and love Israel.
And they find Israeli soldiers handsome, she said.
How Iranian. Yes. Oh, yeah.
Harold, before we go into the potential of what that would mean, I want to take a step back and go inside the mind of the average Iranian, which I think for many of our audience, there might be a gap between what we would think of the average Iranian and what actually is taking place. We can see, as you mentioned, their demographics. The most recent figures that came out in Tehran is that Iranians are having 1.6 children per family, which is far below the 2.1 survival, which means, as I understand, by the middle of the 21st century, 66% of elderly Iranians will be supported by a small group of a young generation. And this is a poor country. So that there's the demographic bomb.
Actually, it's a rich country. The regime steals all the money. It's filled with corruption. They feel no future. They see no future. They want to leave. They want to get out. Iran is a culture in the entire Muslim world. It was an empire for 1,100 years, before the Muslims came and conquered it. And when I lived there, and now I'm hearing from people inside Iran, how much they hate Islam. Man, Islamo nafrat mikonam. I hate Islam. Oh my God, what does that mean? Do they hate Islam? Do they hate the leaders who represent Islam? I know we can't really parse that. We don't know. What is for sure is they were an empire for 1,100 years. Here in Israel, in a few days, we're celebrating Purim. Purim there was an Iranian empire. And if you read the book of Esther in the Bible, it's so Iranian, the culture. They were something. These desert nomads, whom the Iranians call the Arabs lizard eaters, rodent eaters. This is the words that they use for Arabs.
Explain, by the way, Harold, I think to our audience that they are not Arabs.
No.
They are Indo-Europeans, or what is they are definitely, in their mind, absolutely not Arab, correct?
100%. They're Muslim. They're Shiite Muslims. That's a story in itself. It's the center of Shiite Islam, the largest, most powerful Shiite country in the world. Iraq is number 2. But they don't, we were something before Islam. We are coming up now on March 20th, which is the first day of spring. That is Iranian New Year's. That is Iranian pre-Islamic. It's called Nowruz. Nowruz means no is new, Ruz is day. And this is huge celebrations for 11 or 12 days, about 6 days before, filled with food, public happiness, and all that, and about 5 days afterwards. But this is also the month of Ramadan, which is during the day, Sirius and Solemn and all that, where they fast, which in a few days are the Iranians going to publicly celebrate. We'll know.
What do you think? Give us an insight. Will the mosques be full?
The mosques are empty by and large in Iran. That's a way of protest. I can't, let's say you're the part of the ruling establishment in Iran. I can't say that I hate you. If I do that, I could be killed by the regime. But I can protest. I'm not going to go to the mosque. The mosques are by and large empty. They're not totally empty. But it's not, from what I remember, even in the holy city of Mashhad, where I studied, out in northeastern Iran. The mosques are overwhelmingly empty, because by doing that, you're in essence saying, I support the regime.
So if we're basically saying that Iran, the Iranian people have become a secular country, or a country that the mosques are not being filled anymore as a sign of protest. We're talking about a low birth rate. It sounds like Europe. I mean, it took Europe 200 years to go through this process. It looks like Iran has done it in a couple decades, this type of transformation. This must pose a major threat. If I'm the head of Iran and I see I don't have a birthright, and my people are not going to the mosque, and by and large.
So how do I control things?
Right. How do the mullahs react to this?
Very simply, they're afraid, but they're not concerned. Their worries aren't the people, because they still have the force at the moment to keep themselves in power. And when the Iranians see force, they bow down to it. There was a joke that I saw in the Iranian press when they were holding the American hostages, 51 Americans for 444 days. I think that's right. And there was a joke in the press where there are a bunch of Iranian people with masks on so no one can know who they are. And they're about to take some hostages. It's, I don't think, real, with their hands tied behind them with these plastic ties, and they're opening the trunk, and the Americans will look at the Iranian, and this is so Iranian, and saying, I've been waiting, oh, thank you, I've been waiting my whole life to take a drive in the trunk of your car. This is how you bow down. This is what they do. I'm sure that Americans, this is like, what are you talking about? This is absurd. This is how they think of the world. They are very, very proud of their ancient history. throughout the Muslim world. Anything that happened before the time of their prophet Muhammad, which is the 570s CE to maybe 630, 31, 32, we're not really sure. Anything that happened in Arabic is called the Jahiliyyah. Jahil in Arabic means an ignoramus. Jahiliyyah is the period of ignorance. It's of no importance, except that in the only country that I know that talks about, when they talk about the period before Iran, that is unbelievably proud of their history, is Iran. They don't use that word Jahiliyyah because they're so unbelievably proud of this ancient empire that they are part of.
So they're part of an ancient empire. They're proud. Yet at the same time, you're, if I understand from you correctly, they're conciliatory. This, in their very nature, they are not going to stand up and raise a ruckus. So
why? How?
We saw them take to the streets when that unfortunate 22-year-old woman entered Tehran, unbeknownst to her, without a head covering, and was eventually killed. We saw them take to the streets.
Oh, she had a head covering, but it didn't cover all of her hair.
And so we saw them take to the streets.
Yes.
And be mowed down, of course, by the regime.
Yes, because what happens is at a moment like that, if you have masses of people in Iran, and it's also throughout the Arab world, that having people in the stadium is dangerous because the chance for the regime or whatever can all of a sudden turn to chance against. And once you have a crowd, God knows what they're going to do, which means you, if they're in power, you must mow them down. Under the Shah, and this is what I witnessed when I went to university, he wasn't mowing them down. And all of a sudden, the people that I studied with were out in the streets yelling death to the Shah, which they wouldn't have dare said before, and long live Khomeini. Now, this is an odd story. I'm mad when
Khomeini, just for the audience, is the now, of course, the descendant, the second Khomeini, but the head of the Islamic Republic.
He established
overthrew the Shah.
Yeah. Now, I'm just a little backing up on this little story. I knew, because I had studied Shiism very well, that every family, extended family, because you're not Doron Spielman, you are Doron of Spielman, and that you belong to the Spielmans, and that's your loyalty. It's not people in Israel or the West may know you, but they may know nothing about your family, whether you have siblings, whether you have kids, whether you're married. They could look and see if you have a ring on your hand or something like that, but traditional Jews for men, they don't have it. You don't know. But in the Middle East, the moment they look at you, you are the one of the Spielmans. Who are the Spielmans? Oh, they're Jews. He therefore thinks a certain way. And this is just the way it is. So back to the story, I know that every family had an Ayatollah that it looked for guidance. It's usually a grand Ayatollah. And grand is a step above. It's a triple PhD, if you wish. They make religious decisions. They're the ones who decide what the laws. And as an aside, in the video that you were talking about, you have their children and grandchildren who are dancing all over the place and doing all sorts of things and enjoying what, let's say, the West has to offer freely. But nobody will touch them because they are the sons and daughters of the elite who run the country. And if you dare doing that, you're dead. That doesn't mean that they don't have pent-up anger about them, which means when regime change comes, and I think we're on the way, those people are dead. They're in real trouble because what we have in the West, the concept of mercy, which is we hope that God feels mercy towards us. But at the same time, we have a concept of mercy between each other. In Islam, sadly, from a Western point of view, they don't have this deep concept of you should be merciful toward each other. You watch young boys how do they show their power to other young boys? Is they kill cats and they get older. They do other things. It's all a question of power, power, power. Now, going back to these people that I studied with in Iran, I was asking them, who was your family's grand ayatollah? I was 28 at the time. I'm now 75. It's a long time ago, but the culture walks like elephants walk, very slowly. It doesn't change. It does moderate. What happens? I knew the names of 6 grand ayatollahs, and I mentioned them. And Iranians are very good-looking people, and they can look you right in the face, smile, and lie. The lie is really protection, because they don't know who you are. I didn't know what was going on. So I mentioned these names, and all of these guys are looking at me, because the people in the dormitory were males. You don't have mixed dorms. And the most smiling, as if they had no idea what I was talking about. Now, that is the equivalent for a Christian. Someone's a Christian, and you ask them, who is Jesus Christ? And they look you sweetly in the face and say, I have no idea.
Why are they saying this, Harold? But unpack it for us.
Very simply, because I don't know who you are. And you've just, asked me about
a personal question, like who my Ayatollah is a revealing question.
Maybe the Shah who was ruling, if you say my family is with this grand Ayatollah, maybe the Shah is today, tomorrow, a month ago, or a month in the future, going to have problems with that Ayatollah. So who'll come and arrest anybody who is with that? Now, one of the names I mentioned was Khomeini. Khomeini was an Iranian Ayatollah living in Iraq at the time, had been thrown out of Iraq. I didn't know much about him. And here are my fellow students who supposedly didn't know what I was talking about. They we Americans, when Americans don't tell 100% the truth, they look away or something like that. And that's one of the ways we know it. But an Iranian can look you straight in the face and smile and lie.
So unpack it for us. Simplify it for us, Harold. Were they thinking Khomeini and they were afraid to tell you?
No, they didn't know who Khomeini was. And here's the proof. They're now out in the streets yelling, death to the Shah, long live Khomeini. I'm mad watching these demonstrations. And I go back to the dorms, and all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. Harold, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, whatever, running. Can we talk to you? This was in Persian, in their language. And I'm furious at them because they lied to you. Americans don't like when you lie to them. And they closed the door, and one of them asks, in the name of Allah, Khomeini ki hai? Who is Khomeini? They didn't know who Khomeini was.
So they're asking you who Khomeini is.
Why did they ask me? Because they remembered the name. I listed him as one of the grand ayatollahs. I told you I didn't know much about him.
So they were taken by surprise, the average Iranian, when Khomeini came into power.
That he was the strong man. And you ask a question from Iraq, he went to France, and you ask, Grand Ayatollah Khomeini, when this happens, when you're in Iran, every sentence he would start with, Bad as Raftan Shah. After the Shah goes, da 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 da. How you feeling, Doron? After the Shah goes,
overthrow this regime, and then we'll deal with what comes next.
Exactly.
So it is.
He had power, and the Shah didn't do anything to stop him. And so the people saw that Khomeini was powerful. They didn't know who he was, but they thought I did because I mentioned his name before, and I knew very little about him. That's how Iranians work. They go with power. They know how to bend here, bend there.
So following this thread, today, when Iranians risk their lives to send this video to Israelis, they are hoping that the small guerrilla Israel and the large guerrilla United States are going to come and overthrow this regime. Is that their hope? I can give you when on April the 14th this year, I was here in Israel at the time. That's when the Iranians sent all these missiles to Israel, and nothing happened. And Israel responded, and it responded nicely.
And the Iranians were out.
Israel knocked out Iranian defenses.
And that was later.
That was the second strike.
Yes.
The first strike, Israel responded. We hit a few key targets. The second strike, Israel eliminated Iranian defenses.
They were writing out in the streets, on the walls, Israel, Bizan, strike them, the regime, and we will go out in the streets. Can we know what's going to happen afterwards? No. And we always have this thing about people who want stability more than anything. Stability is, I'm going to use that Churchill, way back when in World War II, had to deal with Lord Halifax and the upper class of Britain who didn't like Churchill. And we better in 1944 make a deal with Hitler or we're going to have more extreme Nazis. Hitler said, excuse me, not Hitler. Chamberlain said, no, it's complete victory. That is...
Churchill said.
Churchill said. Exactly. And we're in a situation right now that there are people saying, oh my God, if we overthrow the regime, we're going to get more extreme people. Look, anything is possible when you have an overthrow. You cannot, in war is chaos. You don't necessarily know what's coming out on the other side. But the Iranians wanted, they were out daring, writing, scribbling.
So, Harold, what's the how-to guide? Break it down for us. What is the how-to guide on how the Iranian regime could be overthrown? What does that look like? The people have no weapons. We saw that when they've taken to the streets 2016, 2010 previously, 2022 with the hijab incident. They were mowed down. They have no weapon. How does this happen?
What I saw back in 78, and if you look in Iranian history, this is the way change will happen. There are two questions that are very important. Does the regime have the capability, the ability to keep itself in power, and is it willing to use its weapons to do so? It augurs for the Americans, Israelis, or whoever wants to overthrow the regime to make the regime powerless, not only against outsiders, but you go and you basically destroy weapons caches. The leadership of the Revolutionary Guards, which is the Praetorian Guard, it's the guard which keeps the regime in power. You make that regime unable to give the weapons, to support even financially the guards that are keeping him in power. And the people will see weakness and let them come out into the streets. Do I know what's going to happen afterwards? I can't know. Nobody can know. But anything is better than this regime. And I would just say vis-a-vis the nuclear weapons, as long as this regime is in power, it's important to deal with that problem. But if a regime comes to power and it has nuclear weapons, which we can't guarantee, and wants to get along with the outside world, and it's not going to use the weapons to keep itself in power, and we can't know this, it's not the weapons that matter. It's the people in control that matter. Are we worried that France or England or the United States have nuclear weapons? Or India? This is basically the government has to answer to the people.
So you're saying that as opposed to necessarily trying to take out the nuclear weapons. First of all, there are those who think that Iran already has a nuclear weapons.
I've heard that from Iranians who are in the know for a long time.
And there are those who actually think that if the mullahs see the end coming, that perhaps they would resort to using those weapons. What is your feeling on that?
Iranians, as a culture, are cowards. They know how to bend, some of the things that I had mentioned up to now. They know how to bend to power. There is, however, a trend in Shiism, it's very, very small, which believes that you can provoke their imam, their messiah, to return. He disappeared, I think, in 873 CE. And he's going to come back, and he is going to solve everything for them. And first, he's going to prove that Shiism is the right form of Islam. And the Sunnis, which are about maybe 80% of the Muslim world, that's a lot. The Shiites are a minority of 200, 300 million, that is going to prove them right. And at the same time, you have this small group of mullahs, which historically that most of the mullahs are afraid of, because they believe you can provoke a conflagration, and as Iran is losing, then they can make their Messiah, the awaited Imam, reappear, and everything is going to be fine. There's few and far between.
Armageddon, essentially.
Yes.
Bring it to the brink.
Yes.
And so it's a small group of people.
Yes.
To what degree does that small group of people have control in Iran in your eyes? And is it likely that they could make that decision, or is this a small, minor group?
I hope that both the American and Israelis realize that the only way to stop them, Khomeini, the guy who is the Rahbar, the leader, the best translation in any Western language is Führer, meaning all powerful, like Hitler. His best way is that he should go and meet Allah, and the people around him meet Allah. That will prevent everything that I'm talking about. He was one of them.
If Israel, essentially the Iranian people, in order for this to take place, what I understand from you is there's no way it can take place without international or foreign interference or assistance. Is that correct?
I think so.
I'll tell you the reason I'm asking. Iran, even since they attacked Israel with their proxy 17 months ago, the rial, their own currency, has dropped from already an incredibly low rate, dropped another 65%. Their economy, as we mentioned, with the exception of a few elites, is in absolute shambles.
Yes.
Trump levied sanctions on them, crippling sanctions in 2016, and we've been predicting that they would crumble then. Somehow they managed to survive, carry out a war against Israel, a well-armed war, and now Trump is going to be applying new sanctions again, hopefully on Iran, crippling sanctions. Is there a chance that they will implode internally?
Yes.
Or, okay, play it out for us.
Look, the sanctions are slow death, but they must be enforced very strongly. What President Trump did in his first term in office was, you can trade with Iran, you can buy Iranian oil, fine. You can't use the international banking system, which we control. And China, for example, said, oh, well, I'd much rather, I don't want to be able to not deal with the international finance system. The sanctions are very good, but imagine a patient that is dying and the body is shutting down. First, it's the certain internal organs, then it's others, and I think finally it's either the heart or the brain. I'm not sure which. But that's what we're witnessing. We don't want surgeons to come in and save them. We want the body to die. Well, do we have time for this? I'm not an expert on weapons, even if I worked for the Pentagon for 28 years. I'm a culture guy. I know something about Islamic culture, the Islamic world, Islamic history. So I can't know, but there's a countdown. Will the Iranians, and this is really a bunch of combination answer to a bunch of your questions together, will they say, I'm losing nuclear, so therefore I'll use everything? If you put a gun to my temple and say, okay, Harold, what's your answer is? My answer is, they'll probably give in. They will not, because they want more than anything to survive. They don't give a damn about, there's no Iranian people. There is me, the leader, and my kids. Look in that video again that you talked about, that you have the people in North Tehran. In this, I think the town is placed called town. It's Shimiran. But they didn't mention the name, but I think that's the name of that. Look at the way they live. It's like any, whatever.
Beverly Hills, absolute opulence.
Absolute opulence. And Iranians are very into opulence and show. These people will not be long for the world. They are the families of the rulers. And you, Doron of Spielman, I, Harold of Rhode. In the end, I care about my kids. I care about my grandchildren, my descendants. That's why I have all this money outside the world. That's why a lot of the Iranian leaders have their children in Europe or in the United States. Some of the Iranian leaders have children who are American citizens. And we encouraged this because we thought, that we can influence them and they'll influence their parents. But you, Doron, however old you are not head of the Spielman family. There's maybe a Spielman who's older than you. And when he decides what you're going to do, that's what you are going to do. And if there's an older Rhode in my family, I'm going to do what he says. That's the way these societies work. And you will do whatever for all of your children and your grandchildren. Then you don't even know the names of your, God willing, millions of grandchildren or whatever that you will have.
So Iran, this is fascinating. This Iranian regime and their children living in absolute luxury, screaming, we hate Israel, we hate America, we hate England. These are the same people whose children have those passports, like Ali said, in their pockets. They're in America, England, throughout Europe. And this is fascinating. You're saying that in America, the American administration felt that because those people are there, we could perhaps convert them to understanding Western ways. But even though they're in America, they're still loyal to the heads of their families.
It's the way it is. Let me give you a story. I knew somebody, I think he's still alive, met him, an Iranian, who under his it would be his grandfather was a senior Ayatollah. This is under the Shah. And he brought all of his sons, I think he had 5 or 6. One was the father of this guy who was my friend many years ago. And he said, we need to think about our future. Who is the family? Okay, how do we protect our family? Someone will be in the religious establishment. Someone will be in the Communist Party, the Tudeh party. Someone will be a pro-Shah guy, and it went on and on and on. Whoever is in power, the family is protected. The Americans will say, public opinion. That's kind of weird. One guy is in is an Ayatollah. Another guy is a communist. Another supports the Shah. How did that happen? It's very simple. What is the important thing in the Spielman family? That all of your brothers, sisters, whatever, especially your brothers, sisters secondarily, have a future. And so you have one guy in this camp and another in this camp and another. That's why they send their kids abroad. These people have got tons of money abroad.
So they're hedging their bets.
Yes.
They're taking, it's interesting. The U.S., the West, we look at very short term. The Persians, this is that Persian empire that you're
Sabr, patience.
Yes.
Patience. Patience for us. It's, I have my next video that I need to see on YouTube. And you're bothering me by talking with me now. I'm addicted to it. It's the herald to me that matters. It's not my group. It's whatever. Patience? We don't know what that word means. How long can things take? They'll happen when they do. I'll try a little here and there. In the meantime, I'm protecting my family. You are protecting your family. And Doron and I don't know how long we know each other, but it's long. And the fact that we're friends, and we're good friends. In that point of view, no. In the end, you're a Spielman, and I'm a Rhode. And if your great-grandfather killed my great-grandfather, and you're the strong family, and I'm the weak guy, and we are out of balance, that in Arabic, the word is adl. It's everything in Arabic culture, and Islam is based on Arab nomadic desert culture. When a camel goes down in the desert, it has 2 sacks on either side, which you fill things. It's like they must be balanced. Otherwise, the camel can't walk straight. Adala, which is an organization they translate in English as justice among, for example, the Palestinians or whatever. It really means things are out of balance. It's wrong that the Jews have power. Jews are inferior. They're non-Muslims. Muslims must rule.
I want to focus. I want to ask you a question. So we have an a Iranian mentality, which thinks long term. We have a Iranian National Guard, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is thinking long term, hedging their bets. They realize they've already established themselves offshore if they would need to flee, as I understand. Where is Israel in this mix? The last 17 months, I mean, Iran made a decision to whether they were involved in October 7th or not, I'll leave off to the side. Certainly October 8th, the Iranian Republic decided to use all of the proxies. These were cards that they had held for years, attack Israel. I'm curious, why did they decide to use the cards then? And my follow-up question to you would be, has that contributed to this potential overthrow today in the eyes of the Iranian people?
They know Israel and the United States, the Iranians, extremely well. So well that they miss some of the important nuances. Before October 7th, in Israel, you had the judicial reform thing, you had the Kaplan crowd. I know Israelis are concerned about what's important to them, but it's being observed by outsiders. The way the outsiders saw this is that Israeli society was weak. And in the Middle East, when you in any way show weakness, as they understand it, that's when they pounce. And since Israel was so weak, that meant October the 7th. They had these people, and Israel was so proud of itself. I can tell you that, and I don't know much about the security establishment in Israel at all, but I can tell you on one of the routes, 443, which goes between Jerusalem down to the coast, there used to be this huge balloon over the area around Modi'in. And what it was doing was monitoring communications all over the place, because most of the area is in what is Shomron, or maybe it's Yehuda. It was what they would call the West Bank. But they stopped doing it. And they stopped monitoring, if I understand correctly. And again, the Shin Bet, the internal Shabak, the internal security here, basically, if I understand correctly, had no longer any human sources in Gaza. And they figure, we understand them. There's no way they're going to do anything or whatever. And what happens from the Arab side is a lot of them in Gaza would come and work in Israel. And they were friendly, and we misinterpret in the West friendliness as I like you. I am softening you up.
How does this relate back to Iran? Bring me back to Iran, Harold. I want to ask the question again. Iran decides to enter the foray on October 8th. Why did they decide that day to join specifically? Did they think they could destroy Israel on October 8th?
They did. They misunderstood Israel. The strength of internal strength. They saw the society collapsing internally from their point of view. The government didn't have the will, or maybe even the ability, to stop the Kaplan demonstrations. And when you look down on your enemy, when you don't know what you're doing. I know I control all sorts of things. The Middle East saw this as weakness, and Iran especially. Did they tell Hamas to attack then? I don't know. Did they tell Hezbollah not to attack then? There were 2 or 3 days the Iranians were looking for sure, from their mentality point of view, to see how Israel would react to October 7th. And something weird happened from their perspective. People, for even part of the Kaplan crowd, were all of a sudden, everybody was getting together and doing things by themselves, because down, up, and not up, down. They're going down to Gaza to go and save people. And that made no sense to them. That made no sense to the Iranians. I think vis-a-vis Hezbollah, which is nothing more than an Iranian fifth column in Lebanon, they held, I don't know, but they held Hezbollah back to see what the result would be. Israel proved resilient. Now, Arabs are for Iranians, are like paper towels. use, dispose of, get a new one. So yes, it's an Iranian, Hezbollah is an Iranian fifth column. But if they die, who cares? Because they're Arabs.
And so they were expendable. All of these properties were expendable.
Absolutely.
17 months later, where Hezbollah has been smashed, still in existence, Hamas has been smashed, still in existence, the Houthis have been smashed, Iran's airspace has been rendered completely, been neutralized by Israeli aircraft. Bring me into the mind of the average Iranian person 17 months later.
We have a chance.
Why do we have a chance? Are they
The Iranians have a chance.
Why?
We
Why do
Iranians have a chance.
Why do they feel that after Israel's standing up? What's the connection between Israel?
Israel is showing power. And here, look, the raids, where we are in Jerusalem, excuse me, overnight, you heard of planes going up to attack forces in Syria, and some of them, I'm sure, are going to do other things. Do I know? No, I don't need to know. I don't want to know. It's not good that I know, and it's not good that you know.
So right now, there's a wave. You're saying that the Iranian people see Israel having exerted enormous force, established enormous force throughout the Middle East. It's emboldened them.
Yes.
If we do not act.
Yeah, you're right. Yes, you're right. And I know where you're going, and you're right.
What's going to happen if we don't act?
They will test us in their own ways here and there. And we as the non-Muslim world, America and Israel together, if we don't act, they'll see weakness. And when they see weakness, they pounce. And it'll be worse and worse. You must show strength. Does that mean you send in military? No, you don't need to.
If the regime falls, what comes after this regime? Does this pose a challenge of this possibly becoming like the failed Syrian regime?
Yes and no. It can happen overnight, just like the Syrian regime fell. Erdogan, the leader of Turkey, sent his forces in. Again, these are Sunni extremist radicals. We in the long term, frankly, are much more dangerous than Iran.
ISIS affiliated.
ISIS, I don't care what name they use today, and I don't care if they wear suits and are clean shaven or whatever. They are who they are. No one wakes up and has a revelation and becomes a different human being tomorrow. What the Erdogan saw was weakness. Here was the time to pounce, and the regime didn't know what to do. This can happen in a very small group of people. Again, I'm not a military planner. Take out the regime, take out its ability to keep itself in power. If it doesn't have the ability, it can have all the will it wants and won't matter. The regime can go very, very quickly. With us, what date are you talking about? I'm always asked that question. I don't know. But they must feel enormous pressure. And when we see them getting out of hand, we make sure that that there's no proportional response in this part of the world. You give them a huge response. When they sent all these missiles, the Iranians, to Israel the second time, and again, thank God nothing happened, basically, then the answer is Israel responded with something serious. If I may say, I'll leave out a word, it knocked the you-know-what out of these people, the rulers there. It is wonderful that the West doesn't want to kill people unnecessarily. But unfortunately, the reality of the world are innocent people. Oh my God. The bombings of Dresden, the bombings of Leipzig. Our times, Hiroshima, you have to at times, unfortunately, you don't go after killing civilians, but we don't want to in the West because we have a concept of compassion, and they don't.
You're talking now about if there was to be a strike on the mullahs, undoubtedly there would be civilians that would be killed as well.
Of course.
However, you're saying there's a historical precedent. Sometimes in order to eliminate evil, This is a price that may have to be paid. And the Iranian people themselves, I'll just relate a story. I was in a taxi cab in Manhattan maybe 2 years ago. And the driver turned out to be Persian, Iranian. He saw my yarmulke, began to chat with me. He told me he was a geologist. His job was to go from one end of Iran to the other. He said he knows Iranians. He said they are all waiting for Israel to strike. So if that's the case, and this is a price that they would be willing to endure.
Let me give you an Afghan story. Because I remember exactly when the Americans were bombing Afghanistan and a father was interviewed and some of his children were killed. He said, if in order to get this regime out, some of my own children have to die, the rest will live. Please do this.
Harold, I want to ask you one last thing. This man, Ali, risked his life to send us this video. He obviously sees Israel as what you're saying as part of the
solution.
Alliance, the solution, along with the United States. If he manages to get internet and use a VPN and listen to this, what would you say to him?
Well, from years of experience and what I'm witnessing now, there's a very good chance. Hold on. Sabr, patience. I don't know how long, but I have a sense that now's your time. It's coming very soon. Listen to President Trump. Listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu. Read between the lines. Don't exaggerate like most Iranians. You don't know how it's going to happen, but we're on the path. I happen to believe that Trump, I have no way of personally knowing this, and Netanyahu are going to make sure that Iran doesn't have the ability to use nuclear weapons against America, Israel, Europe. It has already missiles that can go to Europe, and it may have to America, and it will in the future if we have these people still in power. We have the right people in power in the West. Let's hope they do the right thing.
Dr. Harold Rhode, thank you so much for joining us. Can't wait to get you back on soon.
Thank you very much. It's one of the best interviews that I've had.
This is great. Thank you so much, Harold.